Welcome to the Feel Better, Live Better podcast. Our goal is to provide you insightful conversations about all things health and wellness. We dive into the stories, science, strategies that help you optimize your well-being, physically, mental, and emotional health. Each episode features engaging discussions with health experts, real-life success stories, and practical advice to empower you on your wellness journey. Whether we're breaking down the latest medical advancements, exploring holistic health solutions, or chatting about everyday habits that make a difference, our goal is simple: to help you feel better and live better. Tune in for inspiring narratives, expert consultations, candid conversations that bring health to life, one talk at a time.
If you enjoy our podcast, please like and subscribe and consider becoming a digital subscriber to the Albuquerque Journal to help us bring you more content like this. You can find this episode and all of our podcasts on the Albuquerque Journal website, abqjournal.com, as well as YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. See the show notes for a discount code on a digital subscription. Thank you for supporting the Albuquerque Journal, New Mexico's leading news.
Welcome back to the Feel Better, Live Better podcast. Today's episode dives into a major shift in how we treat acute injuries. I'm joined by Dr. Gary Bowman, who's helping challenge the traditional rice method and explain why meat therapy is changing the conversation around recovery. We will break down what meat stands for, why movement matters, and how this approach can impact athletes and everyday injuries alike. Let's get into it.
Beyond Health is dedicated to helping patients achieve a life of health. Our passion at Beyond Health is transforming your health so you can live the very best life. Beyond Health can be your partner in your journey to optimal health.
Well, Dr. Bowman, I'm so excited to have you back. I have so appreciated how our relationship has grown since the last time you were on the podcast. But go ahead, introduce yourself a little bit, and then also you are the founder of Propel Health and Human Performance. So just give me a little brief synopsis of that.
Sure. My name is Gary Bowman. I'm a chiropractor. I have a master's degree in sports science and rehabilitation. I started Propel when I first moved down here to New Mexico. I was working at a functional med office, kind of like yours. And then I decided to hang my own shingle, and I started moving more into sports performance, rehab, things like that.
Okay, great. Well, today I'm excited for this topic because I know it's your thing too.
Yes, love it.
But what I really want our viewers to get out of today is the education of the rice therapy, as far as what sadly, a lot of people are still using that method, but why they need to be using the newer method with the acronym MEAT, which we will go in that further in detail. But tell me a little bit about the rice method, and then we'll kind of transition to why it really is old standards.
Yeah, and you're right. It's some strong dogma. It's still very much widely accepted, but it's inefficient. So RICE stands for rest for the R. I is ice, C is compression, E is elevation. Mm-hmm. So this was all driven around this concept that damaged tissue develops this swelling, this inflammation, and that's the problem. We got to get that swelling out of there and everything will feel better, right? Yeah. It's magical. Yeah. But I think the thing that rice falls the shortest on is the R, the rest, right? Some of those other things are not bad, right? But the rest, I think, is what's really fallen out of favor recently, and why this meat concept makes a lot more sense, because resting really doesn't do you a lot of favors. Mm-hmm. The ice is a little bit of a vasoconstrictor, but it's a good analgesic. Yeah. It's been working for decades. Yeah. Yep. Compression, I think, has some value, right? Yeah. There's some things that compression works for. Elevation, not so sure about that one, yes. But I think it's the R, the rest, that really is like, I don't think that's the right thing.
It's not the right thing, yeah. And if I recall, isn't the one that created the rice protocol, he's now saying, kind of transitioning, I read an article, I know the founder of the rice method is actually moving and acknowledging that movement is so much better than the rest.
Yeah, and while I don't know the nuance
It's driving
of
me
that,
crazy. Yeah, it's driving me crazy.
but I think he came off it pretty quickly, actually.
Yep.
I don't think he intended it to last this long. I think he was probably questioning it right away, but he probably didn't have another alternative, right? Like RICE, what a great acronym.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. But yeah, I think it fell out of favor relatively quickly with this person.
Yeah. So let's move to the newer approach. And for people like you and I, it might be not a newer approach because it's how our brains already think and how we already kind of move through an acute injury. But I really want to educate our viewers of the importance and why this approach will serve you far faster and better and get you back to recovery so much quicker than, and I agree with you completely that the rest is not what we need, right? So the method I'm talking about is MEAT. So M, motion, E, exercise, A, analgesics, 3, treatment therapy, right? So let's move to the M, motion. To me, when I think of this is passively moving that injury, but since it's your area of expertise, I want you to expand a little bit on that.
So when I look at the M of this particular MEAT protocol, the motion is a very, very important component of this. One, because the motion creates a lot of joint mobilization, joint movement, and the joints are very neurologically rich. So we know that pain or the perception of pain is a neurological thing, right? The tissue doesn't complain. The brain tells us that the tissue is complaining. So if we can disrupt some of that neurology, that pain neurology, the movement is something that is analgesic to some degree. But it is important to get synovial fluid going, to kind of get the ball rolling on, collagen synthesis, all of that good stuff. But this is also where I think a practice like ours is very helpful because how much movement? What direction? How much resistance to that movement should I do? And an anecdotal story I would say is I have a woman who came in and she's got some bicep tendon pain. And I'm asking her, so like, how much weight are you doing? And she says, I'm using 15s. And so I put her on my device to test like how much force can she produce through the bicep? Less than 11 pounds. So she was exercising at a weight that she thought made sense to her, but way beyond her tissue's capacity. So no wonder she wasn't getting better. Her motion prescription was outside of what the tissue could actually withstand. So when it comes to motion, there is some prescriptive dose with that. So the first thing we look at is passive, right? Just like you said, how can I passively move this joint without the muscle participating? If I can move through that relatively pain-free or we get close to full range of motion, then we ask them to do some active range of motion or active movement, excuse me, and see what they can do with that. And then we prescribe those directions based on restriction, pain, what we're trying to get back to, all of that stuff. But if it's not prescriptive, it can also be a little bit damaging. So motion is an important one, but it does need a little bit of coaching associated with it.
No, I agree. But, I think, so many people, they, hurt an ankle or a knee, and what do they do for the weekend or the week or 2 weeks? They rest it. Right? And I think it's so important to see someone like you, and like you said, to educate them on the motion, because rest is setting you so far back, right? Because we need that blood flow to that area. So let's go to that next part as far as the E, the exercise. When you have a client coming to you, what is your approach to this? I mean, because I do know, I was reading a study that you will heal 2 to 3 times faster if you get that acute injury into movement and exercise. So how do you approach the exercise to the MEAT?
Yeah, so twofold. So if we're talking about the symptomatic area, now we're looking at, once we've defined what motions are acceptable, what's the volume and load there? So I would consider that transition into exercise. So I want you doing 3 sets of X, or I want you isometrically holding for this period of time. And that prescription comes off of what tissue are we going after? Tendon, joint, or other. I think maybe an underappreciated portion of that is exercising what you can. You got a shoulder injury, keep those legs going. Keep the opposite arm healthy, because that's a systemic reaction that we can leverage to heal the rest of the body. For example, some lower body exercise maybe gets you a little bit more testosterone, maybe a little more growth hormone floating around in the system. Well, the body's not going to allocate that just to the muscle it used. It's floating through the bloodstream, and maybe that shoulder's going to suck up a little bit of that stuff. So I think exercising the well tissues consistently throughout that injury is how I look at the E component of that. We talked about this a little bit off air, but the M and the E on the symptomatic side kind of blend a little bit. So when I talk to my clients about E in this case, I'm talking about like, stay moving. Whatever you can do, let's do that. Because there is this concept of crossover strength. Let's say my left shoulder is in a cast from a labral repair. If I keep working that right arm, the brain is going to transfer some percentage of that strength to the injured tissue, 100%. And we want to leverage that as much as we can. Even if it's a small percentage, it's better than zero. That's how I look at the E, is like, let's keep the rest of that body moving.
Well, and then just, so you tore your bicep and you had bicep surgery on your right. Doesn't mean the next day you can't get on a bike and just pedal that bike, right? Not moving what you just had surgery on, but I think people underestimate the power of just having blood flow, to your point, getting those growth factors going, getting that inflammation going, so that we are truly healing that area that just either had surgery or just had an injury. So analgesics. So tell me a little bit. I think this is something we both probably enjoy. I mean, I'll kind of talk about what I can offer, but what do you offer clients that come to you as far as for the A?
Yes. So that is one where that's where the dogma is thick, right? They want to take their NSAIDs. They want to be on acetaminophen. They want something stronger because it's just disrupting their life, and they're looking for that quick fix. While I'm not just dictating exactly what they do, I'm trying to educate them on why that's not a good idea. Inflammation is the signaling factor to get the body to start to heal. If we just completely diminish that, especially in these early phases, we're diminishing the signal to start that process. And I think a lot of people can understand that. So while in my licensure and practice, I don't have a lot of prescriptive right for analgesics, I really try to educate them on the kind of over-the-counter risk of just loading up with those tissues. Now, I have to admit, there are moments where that person is so miserable, and I know it's affecting their ability to do their job, be a parent or whatever. We're going to concede to the fact that I need you to just make it through the day. But I will always try to be like, see if you can get through the day and just try to take it at night. Like, get a good night's sleep, but let's try to do the movement, the exercise, some of those other things during the day as much as possible. But I really try, if sleep is being disrupted due to pain, which I think is an underappreciated sleep disruptor in the first place. 100%. Sleep is when we're getting the growth hormone, all that stuff that we want. So if they're not getting into deep wave sleep and a little bit of ibuprofen or something helps with that, I guess I'm okay with that, even despite the fact that we're not happy about what it does to the signaling.
Well, I think I really try to educate of why we don't need the anti-inflammatories, right? Kind of for sure Tylenol, because if there's a medication that needs to be taken off over the counter, in my opinion, it's Tylenol, right? Because, it is blocking that glutathione, right? Which is helping, once you block that glutathione signaling, you're really stopping what you just talked about as far as really going after that inflammation, right? The glutathione is so needed. What I try to help my patients is the first 3 days, use movement. Move as exercise. Just to your point, like you were talking about with the motion, is that, and you can probably describe this better than I can, but that nerve path route by movement of what that does from disrupting that signaling, that pain movement, by just simply getting that brain signaling of, oh, this no longer is pain. It actually kind of feels good, right? But I really try to have my patients hold off for 3 days if they can. I'm also throwing red light at them. I think everybody should have some kind of, and it doesn't have to be those big old fancy ones, but just a red light pad at home. I mean, they're a lot more affordable than they used to be. Now, granted, your $30, $50 ones probably don't work because of that wavelength that's needed, but you can buy a red light that maybe is $100, $200 that you can have for all your injuries that will work well. So, I'll have them do that, but I really try to have them hold off for 3 days. After 3 days, start taking aspirin with an omega. That is huge from that inflammation signaling that also helps produce that cytokine storm, right? That we want those extra cells, we want those extra growth hormones going to that area. And then, of course, I think the peptides, right? Which I know you and I work well together as far as referring patients back and forth. But, your BPC, your thymosin beta-4, your copper, your GHKU copper. And then the other thing that I'd also like to know is the ketones, right? The ketone esters. As far as that is a phenomenal anti-inflammatory. And the right one. I mean, granted, even I always tell them if it's really, really cheap, it's not the right ketone.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the truth. Yes.
It's true. But I mean, if people understood what ketones do, as far as your anti-inflammatory, putting that red light, using the peptides that are beneficial. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of all these influencer peptides that are mixing everything because, I mean, as you and I, the molecules are too fragile. I don't think they're necessarily harmful, but you're not getting the benefit of it. And in some cases, that copper, as you know, can be unstable and it can cause some inflammation, which we don't want to occur, right? So I'm definitely a fan of making sure those peptides are split. Yes, that's 3 injections, but if it's you can get the GHKU copper a topical if you don't need to inject into a joint, and then the BPC and TB4, especially BPC, it absolutely works orally. But I think, that's how I get my patients so that we're not having to use ibuprofen and Tylenol right at first, is I think that importance of the motion, of giving them the ability. I mean, I know myself and you too, like when we're hurt, it just feels better after you exercise.
100%.
Right? It's that, that signaling pathway. So let's move to treatment therapy. I think, again, we probably have a lot of the same thought process there, but tell me, what is your approach there?
So when we look at therapy, at our practice at least, we try to extrapolate what's going to be the systemic reaction of that therapy. For example, blood flow restriction, right? It's a very good therapy, but what I like about it is the chemical response. You get increased IGF, you get increased growth hormone, you get increased vascular endothelial factor, which I think is an underappreciated. Like if we can vascularize that area and deliver more nutrients to the tissue, that's a big win. Of course, you get VO2 changes and muscle hypertrophy. Everyone loves that. But I look at BFR for the chemical reaction that it provides. And so we're going to layer that in certain parts of therapy when we really want to ramp up those reparative hormones, or we're really looking to restore, muscle girth to kind of get that back to performance. Another one that we've implemented recently is this direct current wave. It's like your stim machine, but it has a slightly different current. Most stim machines are what are called alternating current. This particular device, and there's a few on the market, but we went with this company called Newbie or NewFit, and it's a direct current system. So direct current is the exact same way that the brain communicates with the tissue. Our body is a direct current system. So in an analgesic perspective, I can basically down-regulate that nerve sensitivity by tapping directly into the nerve, but then I got to do the movement. I can't just let them sit there. You know, like I need them to move through those painful movements while I'm distracting the nervous system and drive down that hypersensitivity into the nervous system. We leverage a lot of joint manipulation. Yes, I'm a chiropractor, but I feel that moving the joints and tapping into that neurology helps the rest of this protocol. It helps with the movement, helps with the exercise, and has some analgesic components to it. So joint manipulation is important for us, and it's very easy to teach our clients how to do that at home to keep that going even when they're not in the office. Outside of that, lots of soft tissue, right? One, clients love it. The research is maybe a little loose. You know, some of it is the human connection. I'm touching you. I'm helping you get better. I care enough about your condition to put my hands on you and try to get you in a better spot. What we feel as practitioners, we're looking for tissue slide, restrictions, fascial versus muscle, tendon, so on and so forth, trying to make some adaptation as far as tissue length is concerned. But what we find, honestly, is joint manipulation frees that up quite a bit. You know, we don't have to do quite as much soft tissue when the joints are moving better. You know, I think one thing, circling back a little bit, not to get off of the therapeutic topic, but going back to these peptides, I love our relationship in a way that we look at different stuff. When I'm at home reading research and when you're at home reading research, it's kind of in the same, like we're trying to achieve the same thing, but I'm coming from a different area. And there's a gentleman that I have been really interested in lately because he's doing a lot of tendon research out of UC Davis. And he is comfortable saying to everyone that BPC doesn't work. Well, he comes at it from the perspective of if he puts a tendon in a petri dish and just bathes it with BPC, it's not some magical thing.
No, I agree.
But if you add BPC, which is just like short chain collagen, proline, glycine, like all the good stuff we want for collagen synthesis, and you add some load to that and get the biomechanical adaptations on top of that peptide, that seems to be the magic, at least on my side of things. So when I have this gentleman who's, let's say, in my circle kind of poo-pooing peptides, I oftentimes am like, well, you're not even using your loading protocol when you're testing this stuff. You're just dousing it with BPC and expecting it to get up and walk out of the petri dish. He's made his money on loading tendons, but yet he's not researching the peptides under load. And so, you know, this podcast that you sent me the other day with Dr. Yerth.
Amazing.
I love how she points out this massive gap in longevity in ortho. We've got some of the leaders in the field coming from ortho. Into longevity, but yet the gap is not being closed that well. That's the space I love to live in, and that's where I think this meat protocol really has so much value because you can layer in these high-level peptides and then still take your information from biomechanics and put it on top of that, and I think that might be the future of blending these two concepts of ortho and longevity.
No, I agree. And as you know as well as I know, I mean, the BPC, TB4, I mean, those amino acids are found in our body. Like, we're not adding anything exogenous. Those things are found in our body. And I need to find that guy what you're talking about. I'm like, what is, but I mean, I agree with him. It doesn't work if you're not adding blood flow, blood supply, restriction, everything we just talked about. I agree with his statement, but it's interesting how he's making that a blanket statement. To your point, he's not even following his own knowledge as far as you've got to load. You know, it's time under restriction. It's, you know, again, that blood flow. We have to have blood flow. You know, I think I knew you were going to mention that muscle stem because I know that's what you used on me the other day, right? Yeah. And definitely, I think the other thing, and I knew the, you know, blood flow restrictive bands. Is there a brand that you like? I mean,
so we use Owen's Recovery Science. I mean, when I first started using BFR, he was the only game in town. And so I invested in his units. We've since invested in smart cuffs as well. I like them a lot. It's a little more glitchy than, you know, the Delphi system. And that Delphi system you're going to find in hospitals all over the world, right? They are like the gold standard for surgical compression, right? But there are plenty of options out there. I mean, with like my hockey players, I don't have, like when I go to them, I'm not loading up my car with all the fancy stuff from my office. I'll take an ACE wrap.
Yeah.
Legs only, by the way, for anyone listening.
Yeah,
Legs only. Because what I have found is unless you're using a tourniquet style wrapping, if you're actually allowing the ACE wrap, the 4 inches, you cannot overcompress that femoral artery. You just can't. Like I've tested it multiple times. And so I feel very comfortable using an ACE wrap on the lower extremity, knowing I'm not overcompressing that tissue. And we'll wrap up both legs and we'll do lunges, we'll get on the bike, you know. So I do think the ACE wraps work great on the lower extremity. It's not safe enough for the arm. It's just not. That axillary artery is too accessible. You can overcompress too easy. You get some nerve damage in there. So that's you need the cuffs for the upper extremity because they auto-regulate that tension for you. But smart cuffs I've been very happy with, and they even have a Bluetooth option.
Yeah. No, that's what I had the old version of smart cuff at our house, and now I have the newer one, and it's nice having the Bluetooth aspect. But it tremendously, like after my ACLs, I think as soon as I got home from the hospital, I mean, that next day I had those cuffs on there. And at first, I just did it on the non-surgical side. And then I think a couple of days later, I actually added it to both. But to that point, I don't think the average person understands that the benefits of just moving something in your body to start healing the injured area. It doesn't have to be the same joint. It doesn't have to be the same side or anything. The other thing that I think is the hyperbaric. I think more and more places, obviously you're going to get better treatment therapy from the hard shell, but there's a place for soft shell as far as helping that with putting more oxygen into the area of injury. And the other one, just to mention is, I think obviously not for our kids or for our professional athletes, but that 40, 50, 60-year-old that, hormones are important, making sure that they are optimal. So, that can also aid in the treatment of the healing. I think a client, a patient referred back and forth is, bottom line is her hormones were deficient. That's one thing that was stopping her from healing was, they were normal, but they weren't in an optimal range to actually make sure that, her cartilage was good. She had the hormones going to that area of injury. Just because, what especially testosterone, estradiol, progesterone, what it does to our ligaments. It actually gives it elasticity. So I think that's something to look at. Knowing that you deal with a lot of the professional athletes, like with hockey, are they still using that rice therapy, or has your industry, I'm just kind of curious because of where it's at in this transition. I think of, my daughter in high school. Okay, their coaches, athletic trainers, they're still very much stuck in that rice mentality, right? And I try to educate them on the ones that want to know. But what are you seeing in your area? Because I obviously, you see a lot of elite athletes.
Yeah, I think the rice has been gone for a long time.
You think? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I think it primarily, let's talk about pro athletes.
Yeah.
They're still on payroll.
Yeah.
Right. So the organization has no time for rice.
No.
It's like, I'm paying you to rest.
Yeah.
Like, what?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think in the professional sports world, the stress of timing doesn't allow for this protocol. Mm-hmm. So meat has been available or more accessible in that world just because we need to get these athletes back. Maybe we are resting the symptomatic joint, but we're not giving that global rest to the system. We need to keep them in shape. We need their VO2 max good. We need the rest of the body to work. That's been something I think that's been going on for a long time. I think the advancements in there are these other aspects, the analgesics, the therapeutics, right? I think in my humble experience, and not to slight anyone, as much as there was activity, the therapies were still very passive. Like, let's just hook a stim pad up and you can lay there with some ice and that's treatment for the day. Okay. That's starting to even improve a little bit. You're seeing a lot more BFR in professional sports. Yep. You're seeing a lot more of these fancy kind of like newbie devices like I have. Hyperbarics are something that for me, I just haven't had a ton of exposure to, but a lot of athletes are seeking that out on their own outside of the organization because the benefits are that high. Now, this is a little bit controversial, but I think that not allowing these athletes to optimize their hormones is going to come back some point in our life as being a disservice to these athletes and maybe a class action lawsuit at some point, right? You get a guy with a concussion, that testosterone drop is instantaneous. And we're not allowing that person to get their testosterone back to optimal levels because it's a performance enhancing tool. I don't see
They're
that.
normal
There's got to be something that improves with someone like you and your ability to get this person back, right? I can't get them on those amazing things because they're all banned substances. It's crazy. And I don't understand that. But even BPC, like you said, naturally occurring, it's in the stomach. How are you going to find that on a blood test? I don't know, but it's banned, you know? So I am seeing a lot of improvements all over the board on that. Now, there are certain sports that are just like European soccer, incredible what those guys have access to. NFL, we just had a guy get his lung punctured through acupuncture. You're thinking this should be the highest level of sports. Now, I'm sure accidents happen. I get it. But from my training, it's hard to push hard enough into someoe's tissue to puncture their lung.
Especially you would think that, that's a lot of space in between.
Right? Yes. And depth. I feel I've had to field this question a lot lately. You know, I had an MMA fighter in the other day, and he needed dry needling. But he was like, "Didn't you hear about what happened to that guy on the Texans?" He's like, "I'm not doing that." And so while we still didn't get to dry needling, I had to tell him, I was like, that practitioner made a choice to keep pushing. You know what I mean? I'm sure you've learned that with your needle tools. Like you get to some restriction. You got to know your anatomy enough to know if like, okay, I can push through that versus, ooh, that's the end. I got to stop there. This particular person made that choice to keep going, right? And so there's still a gap there that we have to close. It just doesn't mean that the best practitioners in the world are tied to professional organizations. But yes, it's improving in that world because we don't have the time to rest, ice, compress, and elevate. We got to get those athletes back as fast as possible. And this meet protocol makes a lot more sense.
Well, and I think, just football seasons, how many times this season did we see a guy, strain his hamstring or, twist an ankle or what were they doing on the sideline? They weren't sitting on the bench. They had him on a bike. And my hope is that people like you and I can start educating the club sports, right? The local club sports, the high school sports of getting these kids back to a movement instead of just setting them on the bench. Now, again, I'm not saying we have to have a bike next to every high school bench, but just that mentality that, like, if it's good for this professional athlete, then guess what? It's good for the high school athlete. That's my hope and what I'm trying to do. I mean, just even with my daughter's teams, that we do not, if we can just remove rest out of that scenario, we're going to get them back to the court, the field, the ring, whatever it might be, faster. So just kind of wrapping things up, what is one thing that you hope the viewers get from this podcast of the difference of why rice doesn't work and why the newer preferred method meat is the one to choose?
That is a good question. If I had to pick one, I guess I would probably try to encourage the reality that inflammation is not the enemy. Yes, like chronic inflammation, not good.
Correct.
But acute inflammation after an injury is a 100% normal thing, and we don't want to just completely shut that signaling off. If you need a little bit of analgesic, try to, like you said, time it, try to tough it out for a couple days. But inflammation is not the enemy. No. It is a friend of ours to some degree, but it needs to go away. That's for sure. It can't just stick around forever. So the rest of that protocol needs to kind of happen. But I guess that would be my big takeaway. And one thing that you said, I know we're wrapping it up here, but man, those ketones have been so helpful.
Oh, they're huge. I mean, they really, and I have to thank Dr. Yurth with Boulder Longevity. She's probably been one of my biggest mentors, and she has taught me how to use them, when to use them, and what it does when you're not using them. I mean, like, you're missing a huge part of health when you're not taking in ketones. I think it's a conversation that I have with probably to almost every patient that has any kind of chronic inflammation. And to your point, like, there's acute, which I think that's your area of expertise. To me, I feel like I'm better kind of in that chronic area, right? I mean, like, I have a patient that comes to me that has this acute injury. Propel Health and Human Performance is the website they're being sent, right? But now chronic, they're having a hard time healing. That's my wheelhouse, right? And those ketones are just so underestimated of what they can do from a brain perspective and just a healing. I mean, I'm to the point of, like, I think, with your hockey players, of like having them do ketones before they go out on the on the ice, so to prevent them from head injuries, to protect them.
Yeah,
right?
well, we had that great experience together this year with that diabetic kid. Like, he did not show up with a history of diabetes.
Yeah.
It happened on my watch. I was freaking out. I sent this kid to the ER twice. Then I call you and you're like, ketones.
Yeah.
So I go and buy him a 4-pack of Ketone
Ketones.
IQ.
Yeah.
And it rescued this kid. Granted, we had to get him in with primary care, get him on the right medication. But in that lag time, as you know, getting into primary care is hard.
Yeah.
But in that period of time, we got him back. We brought him literally back by drinking ketones before practice. Because otherwise, what are we doing? We're giving him cookies, crackers, classic.
And just causing more inflammation.
OJ. That was an amazing, again, interaction. We've talked about this already, but a true testament to, like, give this kid an alternate source of energy. And it worked. It worked great.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, thank you for your time, as always, Gary. And like I said, I've so appreciated our relationship, how it's grown, not only as a friend, but also just as a colleague and someone. I feel like we're both heading in the same direction. Like, we're both trying to work towards helping patients live health. And I truly appreciate our relationship.
Thank you for what you do for the community. I appreciate it.
Thank you.